All right. I don't have a lot of time to record this, but I'm doing it now because I'm about to start the third book, and I only have so much time in the day. So let's get started because I just finished the Elves of Cintra, and well, I'm not going to go on a half-hour-long rant about world building because that's definitely a last book kind of thing. It's not half as distracting when you don't see 50 instances of the word poison. Still needs a thesaurus. He uses poison way too much in this one. And you don't have to focus on the world building to begin with, so it all works out. It always works out a lot better. But the Elves of Cintra, like I said with the previous book, I very much like this book. It's good. I like it. Sorry, I thought I saw something moving on my desk. As it turns out, it was just a letter on a book. Anyway, but it's a really good book. Okay, yeah, it's. I feel like I don't remember how I felt when I read this back in 2008. I feel like I liked the third book the most, but I have this distinct feeling that today in 2024 I'm going to like the second book the most. I don't know why. It's just this weird sense I'm getting in the back of my head that I'm going to enjoy this more than I'm going to enjoy the third book. I don't know why. But it is very enjoyable. I liked the shifting perspectives. You know, I like going from Logan Tom and the Ghost, the little bit we get of Hawk, of the adventure to Mount Rainier. I'm not going to call it Siren Rise because I don't know. It feels more natural to call it by the name that it actually has, and also makes it more identifiable. You know, to call it Mount Rainier, but it was all very well crafted, honestly. The book does start out really dark though. Like I noticed, the first half honestly is really dark. There's a lot of death and everything. Everything doesn't seem hopeless, but everything feels very up in the air. And honestly, it's really good. It's really good because it really creates a sense of tension in the narrative. Now, I will argue that I think it gets a little too dark. Not as dark as, the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara, which I was very explicit about the fact that got way too many people died in the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara. Right? I think I mentioned that when I was either in the third book review or the overall trilogy review. And this isn't as bad, but of course Squirrel dies, and Erisha dies, and Ailey the Tatterdemalion dies, and it's all very tense it's very heavy. It's all the things that happen early on are very heavy, I guess is the best way to put it, and it makes for a very and it gets a little oppressive actually. I was thinking about talking about it more honestly back when I was back before I got through the midway point of the book, and I think when you first see Hawk for the first time, when he and Tessa and Cheney get returned to the to where they need to be. But at the end of the day, I actually realized afterwards that no, the book is actually pretty well paced. The book actually has some really good pacing, and it does a good job of splitting up the dark stuff with some lighter stuff and keeping it from getting too grim, which is something that the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara did not do very well. And I think that's part of the reason I complained about it so much, is because it didn't. The Voyage of the Jewel Shannara got too grim, and I think that was. I guess that's the big thing for me, right? But and don't mind me, by the way, if it doesn't seem like I'm super focused. I am. This is the morning, and I only woke up a little while ago, so I'm definitely not 100% locked in like I would be if I was recording this in the evening. But as I said, as I'm about to start the next book, I want to make sure all my thoughts for this one are fresh. So that means that I gotta record in the morning, without inadvertently tainting it with whatever I see in the next book. I did notice one thing though that I definitely had an issue with, and it's a kind of a consistent thing. And to me, it's it feels like it feels like, first of all, Terry Brooks was on a bit of a post-apocalyptic kick when he was writing this, right? And it feels like he had a bunch of, like, set pieces in his mind. It feels distinctly like he had a bunch of, like, set pieces in his mind as to, like, ideas he wanted to explore, you know, story beats that he wanted to explore. But, and this is, once again, a world-building problem that I complain about with Terry Brooks a lot. But it's like he doesn't think about how, like, each of these individual set pieces integrate into the, integrate into, like, the broader world. You know, and the part of the book that I latched onto really kind of hard when it came to this, just because it stood out to me so much, is when the ghosts are in Tacoma and Logan Tom's gone into the city to try and find medicine for River and Chalk, I think was the other one that got sick, and they get attacked by the Croaks. And during the attack by the Croaks, Candle, you know, the little girl who's a seer basically, you know, she goes to free because basically, if you don't remember, because it's been a very long time since I think a lot of us probably have read this, but if you don't remember, basically at the end of the last book, the ghosts run into a tribe of street kids. Some of them are mutated, some are not. But they run into a tribe of street kids, and the boy who's leading them has like a taser, and at the beginning of this book, at the end of the last book, he panics and shoots the taser at Owl, you know, the girl in the wheelchair, young woman technically, she's like 23, but she has Squirrel, who's like the youngest of them all, and he's like a young sickly boy, and he gets hit by the taser, and he basically kills him because basically the shock to his heart is too much for his body to take in. He dies. And basically what happens is that the boy who killed Squirrel by accident, of course, gets knocked unconscious, and they basically take him prisoner because, you know, it's like they don't want to just leave it, because the rest of his tribe runs off, and they don't want to leave him to basically become fodder for, you know, the various, you know, to become fodder for whoever may run across him fleeing from the battle in Seattle. And they end up dragging him all the way down to Tacoma, you know, which, you know, is a lot closer to Seattle than I thought it was, looking at maps. But basically what happens is that, you know, like Panther is, like, it's, like, very clear that Panther wants to murder this kid. And Candle, being compassionate, and rightly so, decides to let this boy go. And he takes her prisoner instead and starts dragging her back north towards Seattle. And what ends up happening there is that basically she has a premonition, and this is basically this was the whole setup for basically getting Candle's backstory, you know, and how her premonitions work and so forth. And basically has a premonition that there's a dangerous creature in a nearby building, and she refuses to keep moving. And eventually the boy gives up on keeping her as his prisoner and just leaves her and goes. And then eventually he gets killed by the creature. But the problem I have with this is the fact that there's no real reason given for why he would take her prisoner like that. When, first of all, she's doing him a good turn, and second of all, it's like, it doesn't benefit him at all to take her prisoner, unless he plans on doing something untoward toward her, but she's like a 10-year-old girl, so Terry Brooks is never going to take it that far. But unless he plans on doing something untoward to her or something, or doing something with her that is, like, not good. And I don't just mean in the way that I just implied, but in any way, you know, whether it's tortured or anything, or it's like a slave, whatever it is, you know, like, there's no indication. And this is kind of where, like, the whole thing kind of, like, bothers me. This long explanation is basically to explain why it's bothering me. And it bothers me because what we really needed here was to understand who this boy with this scarred, messed up, possibly mutated face is. We needed a reason to understand why he thinks the way he does. there's implications here. There's implications that he's been possibly abused before, that all the scarring on his face isn't mutations, but that maybe he was, abused and treated very poorly because of whatever else has happened to him. There's a lot of implication, but there's nothing explicitly told, because he doesn't talk to anyone. He doesn't talk to any of the ghosts. He doesn't reveal who he is. And that's actually something that really needed to happen in the book, in the narrative. We needed a point to reveal what is in his mind, because it doesn't seem like he's a bad kid. He doesn't seem like he's an awful person. And indeed, for a very long time, it feels like at some point he's going to end up joining them, not necessarily because anyone wants him to join them, but just because out of necessity. But instead, he's kind of just turned into like a red shirt, and it feels off. It feels like this whole minor subplot in the first half of the book is really squandered, because this was like an opportunity, first of all, to see like the perspective of someone who's outside of the main characters. And it's also an opportunity to understand like what makes someone act out of spite, because it's kind of like why he captures Candle. As far as we could tell, because we don't have any other reason or explanation for it, he's just acting spitefully. He's acting he's acting cruel for cruelty's sake. And it's like we go, but there's no indication that he's like psychotic enough to act spiteful in that way, and that's where it kind of comes off wrong. It comes across as though he's just being cruel for its own sake, but we don't get any sense that he's a cruel person. He's apologetic for not apologetic, like he's not, I'm sorry, he's not begging them for forgiveness, but like it's very clear that he feels bad for what happened, because he didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. He shot the taser by accident, and it killed Squirrel by accident. And he's even like I didn't mean it. Like, he doesn't say I'm sorry, but he's like, I didn't mean it. And there's like an incongruity to it that I didn't get hung up on, but it really stuck with me, because to go back to my last review, Armageddon's Children, there is a very serious problem in a lot of Terry Brooks' later writing, where it's like it feels like he doesn't consider the implications of what a particular action or a particular set piece or a particular thing, or like any particularities, he doesn't consider the implications of them, and this is one of them. And it's very bothersome, because I feel like this is like this one moment, even though it's kind of relatively small in the book, is a really big missed opportunity for like kind of like learning more about not just the world, but learning more about this character and how you can kind of extrapolate how this character views the craziness of the world with the rest of the what's the word I'm trying to think of? But it would create a bridge between what we're seeing with the ghosts and with the elves and with the broader world. And to bring it back to what I was saying earlier, I feel like there's a lot of instances like this where there's like set pieces, but they're not given any chance to like kind of breathe and kind of get a sense of any sense of nuance. Because I was complaining, of course, in the last review also about the lack of nuance in the world. Now, there's a lack of differing ideologies and differing approaches to the state of the world. I noticed this too in the same time frame. When they're in Tacoma, they run into the senator, who basically is, who's basically a former United States, who's probably a former United States representative or senator or whatever, who out in Tacoma basically runs his own little dictatorship, basically. But it has like all the trappings, it has all the like superficial trappings of like the United States government, like people, gather for like a Senate hearing or whatever. And again, it's like this weird little isolated vignette, and I don't remember if the senator comes up again in the third book, because there's a lot of people they're running into who theoretically, fleeing the demons, could then rejoin them who can, could then theoretically rejoin them later on. When they flee for the, and they make their way toward the valley. And I don't remember how all that plays out. So book 3 is about to be a real surprise for me, I feel like, because I don't remember anything. I barely remember anything from it. I remember the broad strokes plot beats, but not the fine details. But it feels like there's a lot of... But it feels like Terry is obsessed with the idea of the broad strokes idea of the world changing, but doesn't think about like all the ways in which the world can change, and also ways in which it can stay the same. Because when we come down to it, a lot of it is just like perversions of the world before. But it's like everything is like a perversion of the world before, except for like our protagonists. And it's really kind of irksome to me in the grand scheme of things, because whether it's the isolationism of the compounds, the fake republic of the senator, or Kril Koos for that matter. Yes, I almost didn't mention Kril Koos, who is the fallen knight of the word, who is alluded to in the first book that I didn't bring up because it wasn't really that important back then. The Kril Koos is the fallen knight of the word, who, by the way, should just have a normal name instead of one of Terry Brooks's, silly made-up names. It's just a random collection of syllables and characters. Because this man was clearly born before the apocalypse, and it's like he should just have a normal pre-apocalypse name. He should just be named like Sam Whitmer or something, not Kril Koos. That's not a name, Terry. That wasn't a name. He should just had a normal name, and honestly, his madness might have actually been more impactful had he had a normal name, and you could get a sense that he was just a normal person before all of this happened. But yeah, it's like all madness though, and it's like there's no normalcy, and you're like, well, it's the post-apocalypse, and it's like, yeah, sure, it's the post-apocalypse, but as I said for the review for Armageddon's Children, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be normal people. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be kind people. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be people who try to preserve the real traditions of the past. As to reiterate the point, it's like there's no way that there isn't going to be some version of Texas after 30 years on from the apocalypse. No, there's going to, unless Texas gets obliterated from the face of the earth. There's going to be something that resembles Texas out there, just because Texas is like that, other states, states that don't have a lot of like internal, that are either very small or don't have a lot of internal cohesion won't exist. You're not going to have a Wyoming in the post-apocalypse. You're probably not even going to have like a Tennessee or an Illinois in the post-apocalypse. But you'll probably have like a Texas, you'll probably have Florida. You'll probably have a California. Or probably a couple of Californian states, if we're being completely honest. But yeah, it's a little frustrating because it feels like with a little more effort, Terry Brooks really could have made a super cohesive feeling world where everything kind of ties together in a more logical way. But instead, everything is like an isolated vignette. Everything is like is just isolated and doesn't work together in a way that makes total sense. I'm not talking about like the world's interconnected. I'm talking about in the sense that, you can go from, you can see the logical connection between how like the senator would crop up in the aftermath of the apocalypse, but then there's also like an actual functioning republic, not down the road maybe, but somewhere else, that would make, it's like when you see that, like you can see the threads put together versus just a total perversion of everything we know today. And that's some of the, those are the things that kind of like did kind of like there were things that kind of I noticed, but it's not as obnoxious and as bad as the overall baseline, like the overall baseline uh, what's the word I'm thinking of here? World building, I guess. But on the whole, though, the book is really good, and I do enjoy that. I feel like it's a little weird though that given that everyone knows that everyone, our protagonists rather, more precisely Logan, Tom, and the ghosts know that this demon army is coming from the north, and there's probably possibly another one to the south. At least Logan Tom should at least have some idea that possibly there's one farther south. He probably doesn't know for sure, but he's probably somewhat aware, because he's probably been trying to keep abreast of that. You would think they'd be doing more to warn people of impending danger, as opposed to just like leaving, say, the senator and his followers to to just whatever happens to them happens. It's like you would think that at least he would bring news, like I don't know, like a Gandalf the Young or something, because that's what Logan Tom basically is. You would think that would happen, but no, we're just not going to warn anyone that danger is imminent. That there's a massive army to the north that is probably going to threaten you sometime in the next month or two. Just gonna leave it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's cool. But yeah, overall, very much enjoyed the book. Like I said, I actually thought that there was some really good writing in here. I think like with the last book, the actual story itself is very enjoyable. The characters themselves are very enjoyable. Though I just remembered something. After Kirsten retrieves the Loden from its hiding place, he comes out and he sees Kulf, a man who he thinks is dead, a man who he thinks died 3 weeks ago. And his immediate reaction, especially because he actually does spot his sister, though she must be on the ground, I think, or is these shapeshifts? I don't know. Or is the demon shapeshift? I'm not sure. Maybe the demon shapeshifted while in the dark, and so he sees his sister, but then he sees I don't know. It's not very clear what happened there. But he sees Kulf, and he thinks Kulf has been dead for 3 weeks, along with Erisha, who dies in his arms, and the Tatterdemalion, right? And for some reason, his initial reaction isn't to go, wow, this is weird, I should be on my guard. His initial reaction is, oh wow, it's you, old Kulf, the old man who doesn't look like he can walk farther than a mile without losing his breath. It's like, wow, it's you. Wow, why are you doing here? Wow, it's so cool to see that you're still alive. It's like his brain doesn't immediately pick up on the fact that this can't possibly be old Kulf, because nothing about it makes sense. And it's like, Terry, there's no way Kirsten is this stupid. There's no way that this boy is this stupid after everything he's experienced over the past month. There's no way that after the traumatic experience of having his cousin, who he was just reestablishing a solid relationship with, there's no way that after having her bleed out in a matter of seconds in his arms, and experiencing death so viscerally, and understanding death so viscerally, would see a man who he ostensibly thinks is dead and go immediately, wow, everything's normal. I mean, granted, maybe it's some sort of hope in his heart but even then, it's still not logical. There's still no logical way that Kirsten would see Kulf in the cave where the Loden is contained and go, yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, no, this is fine. This is cool. Yeah, no, this is normal. This is okay. No, his defenses would immediately go up. There's no way that he would be so stupid as to see Kulf and not his sister and go, yeah, everything's okay. There's something else that bothered me towards the end of the book, because it's a very silly reaction for him, Even if you would argue that he was pretty naive going into this whole adventure, there's no way that coming out of it, or rather to the midpoint of it, that in any way he would be like, that he would be so naive that he would see this and immediately not go, something's wrong here, I should try to do anything other than think that everything's normal. Anyway, but that's that. I went on for a little longer than I thought. I do have to eat breakfast, so I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. I very much know I did. I know that I tend to lean pretty heavily into criticizing things, but I can't help but notice these things. I definitely remember that. I definitely criticized the earlier books a lot less, so we're definitely seeing the problem I have with Terry Brooks's later writing, in that it's just, there are definitely more flaws in the storytelling and the character writing, and definitely the world building, though I think the world building has always been kind of an issue. But on the whole, in the grand scheme of things, this is definitely a great book. So anyway, on to the third one. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment. I'd appreciate it. And until next time, everybody.